During the summer, we all like to be out and about, especially kids, to camp, the playground, swimming pools, sports. So today's safety tips for the whole family. Rebecca Michelsen is with Penfield Children's Center, a place that advocates early intervention for kids with developmental delays and disabilities. Hey, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Great to see you. Usually you're here on the couch with us, but it's great to see you remote. Thanks for joining us today. Let's talk a little bit about summer. It poses some special challenges, I think, for us as we try to keep kids safe.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at summer, I think this year a little bit differently than we have in the past. And so there's just some safety tips that we want to remind families of to just keep in mind as you're thinking about your summer planning. I know it's hard. We've all been cooped up for the last few months, and so it's getting nice out. We'd like to be outside doing some of the fun things that we always do in the summer, but we might just have to rethink about how we do those activities.
All right, let's talk about some of those fun things and activities and how we can rethink them and be safe, starting with summer camp. This is a big one for kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. There are a lot of summer camps that aren't happening this summer. They've just decided not to hold them. Some of them are choosing to wait until later in the summer. If you're choosing to send your child to summer camp this summer, there's just a few things that you want to keep in mind. The biggest things to look at is what are their protocols that they're putting into place to keep the children safe? Are they doing things such as screening staff, campers, and parents every day at drop off? Are they doing things like making sure there's enough outdoor time? Because obviously, the more time we're indoors and we're a little bit more confined, it's easier to social distance when we're outside. We want to also think about, are our kids being allowed to bring their own lunches, or are they serving some type of prepackaged lunch, not these family style meals that sometimes they have done in the past at some camps? What are their hand sanitizing stations looking like? Do they have enough of them around? What are their cleaning procedures for both indoor and outdoor equipment? So there's a lot of protocols that you just want to make sure that they have in place.
Yeah, and things like bringing your own lunch and water bottles. I know you've said that. I think that's really important. And what about just in terms of interactions? Because I think what kids have been missing most along with school is that seeing people and interacting with friends.
Right. I mean, I think I'm hearing it from my own son is, I miss seeing my friends. So I think if you know the family well enough, they are practicing good social distancing and, keeping each other safe. They can have play dates, still encouraging those outdoor play dates where you can social distance. If children are not from within the same family where they're residing together, they should be keeping that social distance. So they could still be running around a big open play space, but again, we just want to encourage them to keep their social distance.
Riding bikes, I think, is a good activity for kids right now, and
Yes.
you just kind of naturally have that distance. What about playgrounds? Because I know the CDC right now, at least, is still recommending that kids avoid them.
Yeah, we want to avoid any place where we know that it's difficult to sanitize and clean on a regular basis. If you think about how many people potentially could visit a playground in a day, and just knowing that staffs are limited to being able to reach all those playgrounds and sanitize them on a kind of proper time frame, we want to avoid those because again, without that sanitation, kids are going to run and play on this playground equipment, and then chances are they may go to touch their face in some way and pass the coronavirus to them through touching that playground equipment. So we really want to try to avoid going to places where we know that they just can't keep, those areas as sanitized as need to be right now.
I've been impressed with the places I've shopped, especially grocery stores, I guess, how they're keeping carts clean and separating people and limiting the number of people in the stores. I know the CDC has asked people to only go out when necessary, so shopping is an area where people should wear masks, and kids over 2 are supposed to be wearing ones that fit their face. What about swimming pools? Those are super big in the summer.
Yeah, so a lot of swimming pools are choosing not to open this summer because while there's no proof that you can't pass the virus through water, so we pretty much are sure that that's okay. You have to think about the rest of the space of the pool area. So on pool decks, it's hard to create that social distancing. So that's why we're being encouraged not to utilize public pools this summer. You also have to think about a lot of these places that have wading pools or splash pads for young children also have different types of play equipment for the children to be playing on in those areas. And again, that's a hard area for them to sanitize. So it's more about, again, keeping that social distance from folks. And I think that's the hardest piece to maintain when people are going to places like the public pools, or even if you think about some of our beaches that have been open, how do you keep your social distance when there's a lot of people in those spaces?
What about youth sports? I think kids are so excited about getting back to their teams, whether it's baseball or soccer or whatever the sport might be.
Yeah, I mean, youth sports are a challenge because, again, kids are looking for that interaction. We just want to recommend that you think about how that looks like. What, again, are those protocols for keeping things sanitized? The more that coaches and players are starting to interact with each other closely, there's a greater risk for contracting the coronavirus. But if they're doing things where it's just skill drills, where they're able to keep their distance, those things are okay. But again, the more the sharing of the equipment, the more of just that close interaction with folks. I think about baseball. Baseball is one of those where it's kind of great. You can easily social distance, but you also have to think about, what about the shared equipment? What about the shared bats? What about the shared ball? What about, the kids who have to switch off playing catcher and have to use those pieces of equipment together? So how are we making sure that those pieces are staying sanitized?
That's a good point that I had not thought about. What's your thought about traveling in vacation homes?
So with traveling and vacation homes, we want to just kind of think about a few things. One of the things that you want to think about first is think about, if you're traveling outside of your area or your state, what are the rules and protocols to where you're going? Some states and some cities are requiring that if you are coming from another location, you have to self-isolate for 14 days before you can even enjoy that area. Second, you also have to think about, what does it mean for coming home for you? So again, are you going to have to self-isolate for 14 days after coming home from a travel or from a vacation? But if you're going on a camping trip, you're choosing to look at getting a rental home for maybe a week or a log cabin or something like that, we want to just make sure that you're cleaning and sanitizing the space when you get there, washing hands often, doing a lot of the same protocols that we've been doing throughout these last several months. Also think about timing of when you would arrive at this place. If a person has been using that space within the last 72 hours, it's probably not sanitized yet or the safest for you to enter. So you want to make sure there's about a 72-hour gap in time between the time that the last person was in that rental home and when you start your time within that rental home.
That's great tips for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And for more health and safety tips for families, you can visit Penfield's Kohl's Building Blocks website. That address is penfieldbuildingblocks.org.